Hello, it's Rosemary with Good Journeys Tarot, and today we are in week 2 of Ethony's 31 Days of Tarot, and I'm going to be covering prompts 5 through 12. Sorry, 6 through 12. Prompt 6 was your most anticipated decks. I did back 2 decks on Kickstarter in December, so I am looking forward to those. I mentioned them in my last video. Tarot Bot and Ride or Wait. And those are on Kickstarter, and I will put those links again below, although I think one of them ended last week. The other deck that I'm highly anticipating this year, I've been waiting on a year and a half, like many of you, and that's the Bonestone and Earth Flash. I already know that I'm going to love the images. At this point, I will just be happy to get the deck. I just think there was a lot of poor planning going into this as far as the distribution goes, and there have been further delays due to personal stuff in the creator's life. But I already know the images. They're all over the internet. They're beautiful. I just hope that the content of the guidebook and the cardstock are worth this long wait. So that brings us to prompt number 7, which was, what were your card stalkers during 2019? So I had one card that stalked me for like the last half of the year. And it was always in a spread, and it made no sense with the rest of the cards, and I couldn't figure out why it was there. And I guess I kind of knew in the back of my mind why it was there, but I didn't want to think about it, so to speak. And that was the, sorry, 8 of Cups. And it just always showed up in the weirdest readings about things that it just wasn't related to. And so I just kept overlooking it and overlooking it. And I know that it was an anticipation of moving on in my career. And that's something that I had already had on my mind and that I've been working on and preparing for. And then this past week, I found out that my job is actually ending in March. So now I know my time frame for changing careers, very much so. It's interesting how some cards will show up over and over again. I already have a couple that I have seen repeatedly in January of this year. So we'll see if they continue to haunt me throughout the rest of the year. Prompt 8 were books that I read this year. So I haven't actually read all of these books all the way through, but I did start reading them and I've been using them this year. The best one, I think, was Queering the Tarot by Cassandra Snow, and I love it. It doesn't work great as a resource book because she combines some of the cards in her writing, and that's fine. The cards are all related after all. So this is kind of a book that you probably would just need to read through. And I have read a good bit of it, but I've not actually read all of it yet. I've been using it sort of as a guidebook, working with the Urban Tarot. I also picked up Tarot Elements by Melissa Saneva, and this is a book where you're working through things in your life using the elements. And so I haven't finished this book. I worked through the water element, and I am currently dealing with the Pentacles element, and I think that's probably going to take me another 6 months before I even move on to fire and air. And also Spirit is in here, so loved that book. Pathworking the Tarot by Lisa Robertson. I have read most of this book, but this book is one that is a series of rituals for all of the cards. So you wouldn't necessarily read it straight through, but I have worked through this process in October with Lisa Robertson and others, and that was a lot of fun. I will be going back to this book time and again to do some of these practices and whatnot. So I really wanted to like this book, Your Tarot Court by Ethony Dawn. I started reading it and I just could not, I just couldn't relate to it. I don't, I just am not connecting with it. I'm going to try again at some point in the future. I have been wanting to learn more in depth the court cards so that I can read them better. And so I have been working through that section of the Holistic Tarot. And I have a article that someone wrote, and I don't know the name off the top of my head right now, that looked really promising on the tarot court, but this book just did not do it for me this year. Um, and this book has been around for a while, Tarot for Yourself by Mary Kay Greer. And I did work through this book this year in 2019. Most of it was stuff I'd already done before through various other books and practices and study. But it was nice to go through it again and get some more insight into things I had looked at in the past. So those are the 4 books that I read. I did acquire 3 or 4 other books which I've not even started, and I'll probably be reading those in 2020. Prompt 9 was a meaningful reading, and I'm not going to do that. Prompt 10 is a long lost deck that you want to work with in 2020. So I've only been collecting decks for like the last year and a half. So prior to that, I only had 1 deck. And so, but in the last 2 years ago, I did buy a deck, which I mentioned in my last video, and that was the Golden Thread. And I hadn't used it in over a year, and this last week I felt like I needed to pull it out and use it. And it doesn't come across, I don't think, on the screen, but you can see some there where it's worn. I mean, this is probably my most worn tarot deck. Even the cards themselves on the back, some of them are starting to show where you can see where the gilding is coming off and stuff, because it really has been my most used deck. And I think one of the reasons I'm drawn to it and I wanted to use it some more is the simplicity of the cards. And even though they are really simple, they stick with the meanings that you're familiar with. And some of the cards actually, add their own little take. There's your Hermit. The 6 of Cups is really adorable. It's actually bunnies. And I don't know if I can come across it right quick. Yeah, it doesn't look like I'm going to grab onto it right quick, but that was one of the unique takes in it. It is really a beautiful deck, and I have been working with this a little bit this week to kind of get back into it, because it is one of those things that has been on my shelf for a while. This deck is actually new. This is the Bianco Nero, and for some reason I felt like pulling it out this week, so I have been taking it back and forth to work with me to read with as I do during my breaks for my daily readings. And look, there is that Stalker card. It was actually in a spread this week again, and I think the reason that this one's also one that came to mind when I read this prompt was that, like the Golden Thread, it's simple. I mean, it's black and white, and the images are beautiful. They stick to the Rider-Waite, though they are a different style, and some of the cards do have some unique features to them, like this King of Cups with the octopus there is quite different than the RWS. I may have to stop and yell at my cat in a minute because she's doing something I tell her not to do all the time. There's our 5 of Cups. Sugar. Hey. So those are 2 decks that I'll probably be working with that I've not worked with in 2019. And then your favorite depiction of the High Priestess was day 11. And so I took this card out for reference just because I wanted to say a couple of things about the High Priestess in general. And that is, most decks will give you some version of these elements in their deck if they are RWS based. Sometimes you get decks that have shaman and that type of thing. The moon usually plays an important role in most decks when it comes to the High Priestess. And one of the things, though, that I think sometimes goes missing in some decks is the dichotomy that exists in this card in the black and white pillars. Now, while some decks include those, some decks will just use the moon and the priestess herself and completely forget about that dichotomy, the light and the dark side of the moon and of your intuition. And so my favorite card depiction of this that's not this card is actually going to be the Ellis deck's depiction of the High Priestess, because I think it captures that darkness and light. Sugar, stop. Stop. Okay, she's playing in the trash. It really captures that darkness and light, and you can even see it in the priestess herself as she's exposed to the light and the dark sides of the moon. It's a beautiful card, and so that's my favorite right there. Finally, day 12. The question was, what non-tarot form of divination did you use in 2019? And the answer is none. I did not pick up any new divination tools in 2019. I have picked up runes for 2020 and am beginning to study those, and I'm looking forward to that. I do apologize for my cat's interruptions earlier, but I want to thank you everyone for checking out my video on Ethony's 31 Days of Tarot. Please do subscribe, like the video, and until next time, good journeys.